This week on Forever Spinning, we take a look at the first California hardcore record to make its way into the average American's home as we look at the Adolescent's self-titled debut album. Following the breakup of their previous band, The Detours, Tony Cadena, Frank Agnew, Rick Agnew, Steve Soto, and Casey Royer wanted to make something new. With that, Adolescents were born in Fullerton, California in early 1980. As punk was a raging obsession for youth across the nation, hardcore punk was beginning to bubble, specifically in California. After fallout between previous members of Adolescents who are not featured on this record, the band had a new lineup and began writing music. While California hardcore groups such as X, Black Flag, The Germs were all doing countless shows, Adolescents were sitting back and working on a defining sound. And much to the contrary of these groups, the Adolescents did actually have their own sound. They had this surf rock twist to their quick and loud chord strikes, as well as vocal harmonies, which was definitely refreshing for hardcore choruses. Most of the lyrical content was inspired by first-hand experiences from the band. Whether they are true stories or even just conversations heard on a bus ride, the Adolescents had a knack for picking the right words, whether snotty or truthful, for the right song. Compiling some of their previously written material for The Detours, the Adolescents had also made some of their own songs and were ready to hit the studio. They had already written arguably their biggest single, Amoeba, and it had made the rounds already through compilation albums and word of mouth. Frontier Records got a hold of the single and instantly signed them. Lisa Fancher of Frontier has gone on record to say that Amoeba is a masterpiece of a single from any era of rock music. The band went to Perspective Sound Studios in Los Angeles with producer Mike Patton and began recording in March of 1981. 1 month later, in April of 1981, Adolescent's self-titled debut was unleashed into the world. The first and biggest single to be released off of this legendary LP is the equally legendary Amoeba. Originally written by Rick Agnew and Casey Royer for their previous group The Detours, it was reworked and then re-recorded for this album. It was an instant hit, as it was even the reason that they were signed to Frontier Records in the first place. Before it was ever released as a single, it was featured on Rodney on the ROQ, a compilation album for Posh Boy Records, and it had already given the song some decent exposure. Amoeba has been hailed as a classic, even being featured in such video game soundtracks such as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and GTA 5. The next track I would like to talk about is the prolifically forward-thinking Kids of the Black Hole. This song talks about a hideaway place for squatting punks, full of sex, drugs, and violence. The Black Hole was an actual real place owned by Social Distortation's frontman Mike Ness, and was frequented by local punks who were just looking for a place to escape. The track has been hailed for its trailblazing song structure and vocals, being a cornerstone for longer punk songs. Frank Agnew, when speaking on his brother Rick Agnew's songwriting ability, said that he was writing stuff that was punk but had a Beatles-esque quality to it with guitar harmonies. Kids of the Black Hole is one of the greatest punk songs ever to be laid down, and fortunately for us, it comes off of this Adolescents record. While there's so many tracks off this album that I would love to talk about, I'm going to close out this video by talking about the album's opening track, I Hate Children. It was inspired when Tony Brandenburg, the group's original singer, was taking a bus ride home. He said this song is, quote, a snapshot of a man saying to his wife, with his children there crying, that he hated children. People would always say it was wrong for Brandenburg to hate children when, in reality, he was just quoting this disgruntled father on a bus. This song encapsulates what Adolescents were to a T. Adolescent's self-titled debut record may not be the fastest or loudest hardcore punk album ever, but what it does lack in noise and speed, it makes up in tenfold with its vocals and guitar harmonies. This is one of those punk albums that I feel like I could play to anyone, whether they like punk or not, and feel like I could get a good reception regardless of what they're into. The songwriting on this LP is genius, not to mention the lovely sounding guitars, bass, and drums. And this record would help catapult California hardcore into the mainstream, or, at least attempt to do it. Every track off of this record rips from top to bottom. It was forward thinking, visionary, and just flat out revolutionary in terms of its sound design and structure, especially when it comes to the harmonies. I mean, seriously, at that time, how many hardcore groups would actually focus on harmonizing? I can think of a few, but that number is not very high at all. It's a shame that this group would constantly break up and get back together and really only release some half-baked albums. But it's also still amazing that we got the record that we have now, a perfect time capsule into what SoCal punk was in 1981. So, whether you've never heard this record before, or if it is a personal favorite of yours, Adolescent's self-titled debut record will always be forever spinning. Thanks for watching.